What constitutes progress? What's your definition of progress? Is it 10 billion Tesla bots with natural humans demographically imploding? Is it yourself being augmented via genetics or having AI superintelligence inside your brain via a brain-computer interface? Or is it a different conception of progress? Is it you reaching your highest natural potentials? Well, these questions are more fundamental than most people realize or think about. But I've been talking about it since very early 2021 in magazine articles. And what I did recently was I created a Google AI podcast where I fed my articles and fed a recent story about some disaffection of youth with the way society, economics, and culture is really panning out for them. And I think it makes for an interesting listen. So give it a shot.
Imagine a crowd of strangers, right? Just walking down a really busy city street.
Okay.
And suddenly, at the exact same moment, every single one of them just pops open an umbrella.
Right.
You wouldn't look at that crowd and assume that they were part of some grand, coordinated conspiracy to, block out the sun or something.
No, of course not. You just assume it started raining.
Exactly. You instantly understand that they're all simply responding to the exact same rain. Their timing matches purely because their environment matches.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are taking a really fascinating stack of sources that you, the listener, shared with us. And it's all centered around the extensive writings of journalist Joe Doran, spanning from roughly 2021 through 2024.
It's a very dense collection of work.
It really is. And our mission today is to examine this profound question that his work poses. Basically, does advancing technology actually benefit natural humanity? Or is it a destructive force that's pushing us toward this completely synthetic, engineered future?
Right, which is a massive, massive question to tackle.
Huge. But before we dive into the deep end of this material, there is a crucial baseline I really need to establish with you. The sources you provided touch on some highly charged political and social topics.
Very charged.
Yeah, ranging from both left-wing and right-wing perspectives. So we are going to be discussing topics like vaccine mandates, lab leaks, climate change, and election manipulation, exactly as they are framed in your texts.
Right.
And I want to be crystal clear here. We're impartially reporting on the content provided in your sources. We aren't taking sides or endorsing these viewpoints. Our only goal today is to clearly convey the ideas contained in the original material you shared with us.
Yeah, and the scope of Doran's thesis really requires that kind of wide lens objective approach.
Always.
Because he is essentially attempting to diagnose the fundamental architecture of the 21st century. I mean, he's pulling from economics, behavioral psychology, evolutionary biology, and, the underlying philosophies of global power structures.
It's a lot to synthesize.
It is. And to understand the technological endgame that Doran is warning about, we first have to understand the sociological baseline that he believes we're currently operating in.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I want to start with that umbrella metaphor I mentioned at the top.
Yeah, that's a great starting point.
Because it comes directly from a June 2026 Psychology Today article that was included in your sources. The headline is, let me find it here. "We built the machine, then blamed the kids for unplugging."
Such a provocative title.
Really is. The piece is examining this massive, undeniable trend of Gen Z and Gen Alpha seemingly just abandoning traditional societal milestones.
You're right, like skipping college.
Yeah, bypassing university degrees, rejecting standard corporate labor models, and some are even abstaining from basic rites of passage, like getting a driver's license.
Which is wild to older generations.
Exactly. But the author of this article approaches this not as a cultural failure of the youth, but as a mechanical failure of the economy.
And, the author's background provides a really crucial lens here.
Oh, right, the finance background.
Yeah. This is someone who spent over 7 years deeply embedded in the financial industry before they transitioned into academia.
So they actually know how the money moves.
Exactly. They understand the literal mechanics of modern wealth generation. And the argument presented in the article is that older generations have engineered an economy entirely optimized for asset appreciation and quarterly returns.
Right.
In practical terms, that means the system is designed to disproportionately reward those who already own assets, real estate, equities, corporate monopolies.
While actively depreciating the value of raw human labor.
Precisely. The author argues that the older generations essentially pulled the ladder up behind them.
Wow.
Yeah. They built a labor market that demands exponentially more effort and technical skill every single year while offering significantly less economic stability and purchasing power in return.
And you really see this play out in the behavioral psychology of the younger generation.
Oh, absolutely.
The author relies heavily on the principles of operant conditioning, which basically dictates that a behavior is shaped by its consequences. Like, if a rat in a maze presses a lever and gets a pellet of food, it will keep pressing the lever.
Right. The reward reinforces the action.
Exactly. But if the food stops coming and suddenly the maze gets twice as long and the lever gets twice as heavy...
The rat doesn't just keep pressing it out of some, sense of moral duty.
No, it stops. It just abandons the behavior entirely because the reward mechanism is fundamentally broken.
And applying that to the modern labor market, the pellet was the promise of a middle-class life.
Home ownership.
Yeah, home ownership, a secure retirement, the ability to support a family on a single income. Gen Z has observed the millennials and even Gen X run that exact maze.
And they saw what happened.
They watch people take on massive student debt, work 80-hour weeks, and still remain completely locked out of those baseline stability markers.
Because housing and living costs just vastly outpaced wage growth.
Exactly. So the psychological reward that previously reinforced participation in the corporate machine it's fundamentally evaporated.
You know, I look at this through a biological lens.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think of an animal in the wild conserving energy. Like, if a certain species of bird usually spends 100 calories flying to a specific canopy to forage for berries that provide 300 calories, that's a net positive survival mechanism.
Right. It's worth the trip.
Right. But if the environment degrades and flying to that canopy now costs 400 calories to retrieve only 100 calories of food, the bird doesn't keep flying.
It just sits in the nest.
It sits in the nest and conserves its energy. So, is society misdiagnosing a highly rational evolutionary survival mechanism as generational laziness?
That is exactly what the Psychology Today piece argues.
Wow.
Society is looking at an organism that is accurately assessing its environment and concluding that the energy expenditure no longer produces a survival advantage.
It makes total sense when you frame it like that.
Right. And when the author talks about the scolding of the youth, the countless articles calling them fragile or claiming they lack a work ethic, they interpret that scolding as an expression of profound fear from the older generations.
Fear. Because they realize the system they built is failing.
Exactly. It is much easier to diagnose the youth with a character flaw than it is to admit the economic environment you built is structurally hostile to human flourishing.
And that fear also manifests in this really bizarre theory that the youth are organizing some kind of, silent coordinated strike to destroy the economy.
Oh yeah, the secret group chat theory?
Right. But as the author points out, a 19-year-old simply hasn't existed on the planet long enough to build the vast relational networks, the capital, and the institutional leverage required to orchestrate a synchronized societal rebellion.
Attributing that level of logistical mastery to millions of disconnected teenagers is just absurd.
It's the umbrellas.
Exactly, which brings us right back to the umbrella metaphor. They aren't colluding. They are simply responding to the same rain. They are independently running the math on a rigged game, feeling the friction of that system, and independently choosing to opt out.
Yeah.
And this mass opting out serves as the perfect entry point for Joe Doran's broader analysis. Because if millions of people are instinctively withdrawing from the societal machine, Doran argues we have to look at the architects who built that machine.
People running the maze.
Right. And he categorizes these architects as the technocratic elite.
Okay, so this is where Doran's overarching thesis really kicks in, which he tracks meticulously across his writings from 2021 to 2024. He argues that the defining struggle of the 21st century is this technocratic elite prioritizing an unbounded version of science and progress over the preservation of natural human life.
And to really grasp his argument, we need to clearly define what he actually means by technocracy.
Yeah, because he isn't just talking about, software engineers or tech CEOs.
Not at all. He defines technocracy as a philosophical quest to comprehensively apply science to engineer human progress with absolutely no bounds.
No bounds. That sounds dangerous.
It is. The concept of having no bounds is the absolute linchpin of Doran's entire argument. In a technocratic framework, science ceases to be merely a tool for discovery and becomes a comprehensive methodology for managing society.
Like managing every aspect of it.
Right. To perfectly engineer and optimize a complex system like human society, a technocrat cannot tolerate hidden variables. If there are unknowns, the mathematical models fail.
So they need all the data.
Exactly. Therefore, by its very nature, technocracy demands the construction of total mass surveillance environments. It requires the extraction of data from every transaction, every physical movement, every biometric fluctuation.
Which means privacy, in that framework, isn't just an inconvenience to the technocrat. It is a direct threat to the optimization of the system.
That's spot on.
Because anything that remains private is basically unaccounted for.
And what cannot be accounted for cannot be controlled. Doran argues that this mindset inherently reduces a human being from a sovereign individual with inherent dignity into a mere biological data point.
Just a number on a spreadsheet.
Right. To the technocrat, humans are just another substrate, a collection of inputs and outputs that can be hacked, engineered, and ultimately upgraded or replaced.
And Doran provides some really interesting historical context to show how the justification for elite rule has evolved to reach this point.
He does.
He looks at how ruling classes historically maintained control. Like in the 18th century, a monarch like Louis XIV justified absolute authority through the concept of divine right.
The conceit was that their bloodline was chosen by God, placing them above the masses.
Exactly. But as society became increasingly secularized, that justification obviously lost its power.
Right.
So Doran argues that the modern elite required a new conceit, like a new religion to justify their authority, and they found it in Scientism.
And we must draw a hard line here between science and Scientism, as Doran does.
What's the difference, according to him?
Well, science is a rigorous, skeptical method of inquiry. It's proposing a hypothesis, testing it, and crucially, remaining open to being proven wrong.
It's a process.
Exactly. Scientism, on the other hand, is an inflexible ideology. It elevates scientific output to the level of infallible dogma.
Like treating a lab coat like a priest's robe.
Yes. It operates on the belief that because science can calculate the trajectory of a rocket, it can also calculate the optimal way to govern human behavior, dictate morality, and manage global populations.
Which is a terrifying leap.
It is. And Doran relies on the foresight of C.S. Lewis to illustrate the terrifying endgame of this ideology.
Yeah, the sources heavily reference C.S. Lewis's book, The Abolition of Man, along with this really specific essay he wrote in 1958 titled Willing Slaves of the Welfare State.
Which is just prophetic.
It's crazy because Lewis was writing this decades before the invention of the internet, let alone artificial intelligence. Yet his warnings about a scientocracy read like a direct critique of modern Silicon Valley. Lewis warned that humanity would be tempted to trade its freedom for the promise of a perfectly managed, scientifically optimized utopian welfare state.
Lewis posed a brilliant, haunting question in that essay. He asked, is there any possibility of getting the super welfare state's honey and avoiding the sting?
Wow.
He recognized the illusion embedded in the phrase, mankind taking charge of its own destiny. Lewis pointed out that humanity as a whole doesn't take charge of anything.
Right.
In reality, that phrase simply means that a very small, elite group of men will take charge of the destiny of everyone else, using the power of the state and the authority of science to enforce their will.
Okay, I need to play devil's advocate here for a second and push back a little on Doran's alarmism.
Go for it.
Throughout all of human history, we have experienced massive technological disruptions that provoked widespread panic. Like when the Industrial Revolution mechanized agriculture and textile manufacturing, people who were terrified of being replaced literally smashed the loom.
The Luddites, right.
Right. But society eventually adapted. We built labor unions, we instituted child labor laws, we established the weekend. The technology, while super disruptive, ultimately lifted global living standards to unprecedented heights. So, why does Doran view artificial intelligence and biotechnology as fundamentally different from the steam engine or the printing press?
What's fascinating here is the mathematical reality of acceleration beyond human social constraints.
Okay.
Doran utilizes game theory to explain why this era is uniquely perilous. During the Industrial Revolution, the pace of technological innovation, while fast for its time, was still slow enough that human societal structures could catch up.
So we had a buffer.
Exactly. The feedback loop of disruption allowed for a generation to experience the pain of industrialization, analyze it, and subsequently build the moral, legal, and regulatory frameworks you just mentioned. There was a state of relative equilibrium.
We had the luxury of time to build the guardrails.
We did. But modern emerging technologies, specifically artificial general intelligence and heritable gene editing, operate on exponential growth curves that vastly outpace human cognitive and regulatory capabilities.
It's moving too fast to regulate.
Precisely. By the time our regulatory body understands the implications of an AI model, the model has already iterated multiple generations past their comprehension.
Jeez.
Furthermore, Doran notes a fundamental shift in the intent of the technology. The steam engine was designed to serve humanity by augmenting physical strength.
Making things easier for us.
Right, but the emerging technologies of the 21st century are increasingly designed to transcend and eventually replace natural humanity altogether.
And that brings us to the physical manifestation of this agenda. Doran views the year 2021 as a massive turning point, where the technocratic elite explicitly revealed their hand regarding this replacement strategy.
Yes, the sources highlight two major technological unveilings from that year.
Right, and these illustrate how humanity is being simultaneously trapped in the virtual world and replaced in the physical one. Let's look at the virtual trap first, Horizon Workrooms.
This was the platform introduced by Mark Zuckerberg for virtual reality workspaces. The pitch was that you would strap a headset to your face, and your physical desk, your keyboard, and your environment would be digitally mapped into a virtual realm where you interact with cartoon avatars of your colleagues.
Floating torsos.
Exactly. It was aggressively marketed as the liberated future of white-collar labor.
But Doran zeroes in on the massive, glaring irony of the timing of all this.
The timing is key.
Yeah, because during this exact same period, major tech monopolies were actively supporting and immensely profiting from unprecedented real-world physical restrictions.
The lockdowns.
Yes. The very platforms that were policing speech, advocating for physical lockdowns, and championing the suppression of physical human interaction were simultaneously offering the metaverse as the ultimate synthetic alternative.
It was essentially a message of, the physical world is now restricted, dangerous, and heavily monitored, but don't worry, you can migrate your entire existence into our digital simulation.
Doran argues that restricting the freedom of physical reality paves the psychological road for the metaverse.
It creates the demand.
Right. If the physical world becomes too painful or isolated to navigate, a synthetic reality becomes highly appealing.
However, the true danger lies in the architecture of that synthetic reality.
Because they own it.
Exactly. In the physical world, no single corporation can control the weather, the landscape, or the physics of your conversation. But in a metaverse environment, the tech corporation literally owns the physics of your reality.
That is so dystopian.
They control the code that dictates what you see, who you can interact with, and what information exists. Doran points out that these same monopolies already demonstrate a willingness to suppress dissenting voices and influence elections on 2D social media platforms. If humanity migrates into a 3D synthetic reality, the level of absolute authoritarian control these corporations would wield over human perception is absolute.
So the technocrats effectively quarantine the human mind in a virtual simulation. But what happens to the physical world? Well, we're strapped into headsets.
That brings us to the second major 2021 unveiling Doran analyzes.
Elon Musk and the Tesla bot.
Right.
Musk stood on a stage and introduced a 5'8", 125-pound humanoid robot integrated with Tesla's AI networks. And Musk didn't mince words about the goal. He explicitly stated that the objective was a total labor takeover, claiming that in the future, physical labor would be a choice.
And, to a public exhausted by the rigged economy we discussed earlier, the promise of never having to perform backbreaking labor again might sound like a total utopia.
Who wouldn't want that?
Exactly. But Doran, applying the logic of technocracy, sees the architecture of total subjugation. During that presentation, Musk casually suggested that the deployment of AI robotics would necessitate a universal basic income. Right. Doran argues that we must look at the mechanics of what UBI actually represents in a post-labor society. If a fleet of AI-driven robots can perform every function necessary to sustain civilization, farming, manufacturing, logistics, construction, the average natural human being ceases to be essential to the functioning of society.
You completely lose all your leverage.
All of it.
If you don't grow the food, build the houses, or transport the goods, you have no economic power. You simply become a dependent ward of the state or a dependent ward of a massive tech conglomerate.
Receiving a digital allowance strictly to consume virtual content in your headset.
Wow. So Doran views a universal basic income tied to human obsolescence not as liberation, but as the ultimate form of dependency.
Yes. And to highlight just how dangerous this concentration of power is, Doran contrasts the technocratic vision with the political architecture designed by the American founders.
Okay, how so?
The founders possessed a deep, cynical understanding of human nature. They believed that unfettered power inherently corrupts, so they designed a system with its executive, legislative, and judicial branches and the tension between federal and state authorities specifically to disperse power and create friction against tyranny.
Checks and balances.
Right. They sought to enfranchise the individual. The technocratic model is the exact inverse. It seeks to centralize all power, monopolizing the physical world through AI and robotics, and monopolizing the psychological world through the metaverse.
Which forces a very, very dark question. If the physical world is handed over to AI and humanity is pacified into digital dependency, what is the ultimate end game?
What's the goal?
Right. Where do the elites actually want to steer the human species? Doran's analysis of the source material outlines two highly distinct, seemingly contradictory paths that the technocratic elite are currently pursuing to answer that question.
Yeah, Doran categorizes the technocratic vision into two primary ideologies. The first is the profoundly pessimistic view driven by the degrowth movement. The second is the aggressively optimistic view, optimistic for the elites anyway, which is transhumanism.
Let's examine the mechanics of the pessimistic view first. The degrowth movement.
Sure.
This movement operates on the foundational assumption that the Earth is a rigidly finite system, and that the sheer existence of billions of biological humans is akin to a cancer rapidly depleting the host organism.
Right. And Doran traces the modern iteration of this ideology back to a highly influential 1972 book titled The Limits to Growth.
1972.
Yeah. The researchers behind this text utilized computer models to run various scenarios of civilizational development, ultimately concluding that the pursuit of continuous economic expansion would inevitably lead to catastrophic global collapse.
So they thought we were doomed if we kept growing.
Exactly. The core tenet of their solution was that humanity must aggressively halt, and preferably reverse, global population growth. And Doran includes a particularly revealing quote from a 2016 interview with Dennis Meadows, one of the primary co-authors of the book.
The quote Doran pulls from Meadows is genuinely staggering to read.
It really is.
Meadows openly states that the planet can support perhaps 1 or 2 billion people with liberty and a high standard of living. He then says, and I'm quoting directly from the source here, we could even have 8 or 9 billion, probably, if we have a very strong dictatorship, which is smart. But we want to have freedom and we want to have a high standard, so we're going to have 1 billion people, and we're now at 7, so we have to get back down.
It's chilling.
It's the author of a foundational environmental text openly expressing a hope for a peaceful mechanism to eradicate 6 or 7 billion human beings from the planet.
Meadows refers to these as his pessimistic hopes.
That's a mild way to put it.
Right. Doran argues this, quote, perfectly encapsulates the elite degrowth mindset. It's the belief that the vast majority of natural humans are simply excess carbon footprints that need to be managed out of existence to preserve the pristine nature of the globe.
But Doran pushes back on this, right?
Very strongly. He meticulously dismantles the foundational assumptions of the degrowth models. He points out that the limits to growth models failed because they fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human ingenuity.
They didn't factor in innovation.
Exactly. They treated humans merely as consumers of finite resources, completely failing to account for the exponential nature of technological innovation.
And Doran cites data from researcher Max Roser to prove this.
Yes, the Roser data is key.
Roser's data demonstrates that over the last 200 years, the global population expanded 7-fold. If the degrowth models were accurate, this massive population explosion should have resulted in total planetary depletion and driven humanity into unprecedented extreme poverty.
Right, mathematically, that's what they predicted.
But instead, the exact opposite occurred.
Economic growth and technological advancement vastly outpaced the population increase. Human innovation created previously unimaginable efficiencies in agriculture, water sanitation, and energy production.
We didn't just consume the pie faster.
No, human intellect continually expanded the size of the pie, leading to the greatest reduction in extreme poverty in recorded history.
So the models were just wrong.
Yes. And Doran suggests that because the catastrophic predictions failed to materialize, the degrowth movement simply shifted the goalposts to maintain its narrative of necessary suppression.
He uses the 1970 Clean Air Act in the United States as a prime example of this shifting narrative.
A great example.
When that landmark legislation was passed, The focus was entirely on tangible, visible pollutants that actively harmed human health. Things like carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and physical smog.
Things that literally poison you.
Right. Interestingly, the original act didn't even classify CO2 as a pollutant.
Because CO2 is a naturally occurring trace gas essential for plant life and the biological functioning of the Earth.
Yeah.
But Doran argues that once human innovation largely mitigated those visible harmful pollutants through things like catalytic converters, the technocratic establishment needed a new crisis.
They needed a reason to maintain control.
Exactly. They needed a crisis to justify controlling energy consumption and stunting economic growth in developing nations. So they redefined CO2 as an existential threat, allowing them to regulate the very foundation of modern civilization, which is energy access.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that pessimistic shrink humanity to save the dirt philosophy seems to violently clash with the second technocratic path Doran outlines, which is transhumanism.
It does seem like a contradiction.
Yeah, if degrowth wants to return us to a pre-industrial harmony with nature, transhumanism wants to violently conquer nature and transcend human biology altogether.
Transhumanism views the biological limitations of the natural human body, our susceptibility to disease, our limited memory capacity, our inevitable mortality, not as a beautiful part of the natural order, but as a tragic beta version of existence.
Like bad software that needs a patch.
Exactly, a beta version that must be urgently patched and upgraded. They seek to engineer past these biological constraints using artificial general intelligence and heritable genome editing.
And heritable genome editing is the practice of altering the DNA of embryos so that the synthetic changes are passed down to all future generations, right?
Yes, permanently altering the human germline.
Doran highlights a quote from Bill Gates discussing the future of artificial intelligence to really illustrate this mindset. Gates marvels at the raw physics of computing, pointing out that electrical signals traveling through a silicon chip move roughly 100,000 times faster than the biochemical signals traveling through the neural pathways of the human brain.
100,000 times faster.
Right. Gates essentially dismisses the human mind as operating at a snail's pace, arguing that once AGI achieves parity with human reasoning, its silicon-based architecture will allow it to operate without any practical limits on speed or memory.
Okay, so let's look at the friction here.
Let me pause here because my head is definitely spinning, trying to reconcile these two visions.
It's a lot.
On one side, you have the degrowth advocates who argue we must drastically shrink the human population because we are a toxic burden on a finite planet. On the other side, you have the transhumanists who want to merge our consciousness with AGI and edit our DNA so we can become immortal silicon-based gods. These sound like polar opposite philosophies.
The contradiction is entirely superficial.
Really?
Yes. Doran argues that if you strip away the varying methods, both ideologies converge on the exact same endpoint.
Which is?
The absolute erasure of the natural biological human being.
Oh, wow.
This is the unifying theory of the technocratic elite. Both the degrowth activist and the transhumanist share a profound foundational contempt for average, unengineered humanity.
We both hate the natural human.
They both view the natural human as fundamentally flawed, inherently obsolete, or an unacceptable burden on the system. Whether a technocrat is attempting to eradicate natural humans through aggressive population control to save the planet, or attempting to eradicate natural humans by uploading their consciousness into a synthetic machine to achieve immortality, the natural human is extinguished either way.
It fundamentally changes how you view the rapid acceleration of these technologies.
It really does.
It leads Doran to ask a terrifying question in his 2024 writings. What happens when this flavor of unbounded scientific curiosity, fueled by a latent contempt for natural humanity, operates without any moral or ethical guardrails?
That is the big question.
And the sources provide an example that sounds like pure science fiction, but it is currently happening in laboratories right now. Doran points to recent studies highlighted in the journal Science concerning the creation of synthetic mirror bacteria.
To understand the mechanics of why this is so dangerous, we have to look at molecular chirality.
Molecular chirality. Okay, explain that.
In nature, biological molecules often have a specific orientation, usually referred to as being right-handed or left-handed. Almost all naturally occurring life on Earth utilizes left-handed amino acids and right-handed sugars.
Okay, so there's a natural geometry to it.
Exactly. An immune system is highly trained to recognize and fight off threats that possess this natural molecular orientation.
But researchers are now artificially assembling bacteria using genetic sequences and molecular shapes that are the exact mirror opposite of those found in nature.
Right. They are creating synthetic life forms that biological history has literally never encountered.
And because these mirror molecules have the opposite orientation, the natural enzymes and immune responses in humans, animals, and plants just cannot recognize them.
They are essentially invisible to our natural defenses.
That's terrifying.
Doran points out that the journal Science openly acknowledges the catastrophic risk here. If these synthetic mirror bacteria were to escape the lab, they could evade ecological immune mechanisms and cause irreversible, lethal infections on a global scale.
Like an unstoppable plague.
Yes. They could act as an unstoppable, synthetic, invasive species, disrupting the foundation of the entire planetary food chain.
And the justification the researchers gave for taking on this apocalyptic level of risk. Doran notes that they admitted they pursued this line of synthetic biology simply out of scientific curiosity.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the God complex.
Yeah.
They are risking the catastrophic collapse of the global ecosystem simply to prove that their technical prowess is capable of doing so.
Just because they can.
Right. And Doran connects the hubris of the mirror bacteria experiments directly to his analysis of the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
He examines the gain-of-function research conducted at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which involved manipulating naturally occurring coronaviruses to make them more infectious and lethal to human airway cells.
And again, just to reiterate, for you listening, we are strictly conveying Doran's analysis as presented in the text you provided. We're impartially reporting this. Doran traces the funding of that gain-of-function research back to Dr. Fauci's NIH, framing it as yet another catastrophic example of an elite scientocracy playing with planetary fire, completely insulated from the consequences of their unbounded curiosity.
For Doran, the specific technology is secondary to the underlying philosophy driving it.
It's a pattern of behavior.
Yes. Whether scientists are engineering more lethal viruses in Wuhan, or creating mirror bacteria that could wipe out agriculture, or military contractors rapidly accelerating AI-powered autonomous drone warfare. He even points to recent unidentified anomalous phenomena sightings that some analysts suspect are highly advanced drones sniffing for nuclear radiation.
It's all the same root cause.
It all emanates from the exact same unchecked technocratic arrogance.
It's the pursuit of absolute power masquerading as scientific progress. And Doran captures this brilliantly in an essay titled Knowledge and Meaning, a meditation for the season, where he utilizes a philosophical analogy from the book of Genesis.
It's a very powerful analogy.
He examines the story of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. Doran points out that God didn't forbid Adam and Eve from eating the fruit because the Creator was anti-science or hated human learning.
Right, it wasn't about keeping them ignorant.
Exactly. The fruit was forbidden because the specific knowledge it offered was the power to redefine reality itself. And unfettered power inherently corrupts the biological creature that wields it.
This raises an important question regarding the psychology of the technocratic elite. How did a class of highly educated engineers and scientists arrive at a point where their version of progress actively threatens the survival of their own species?
It seems so counterintuitive.
It does. Doran explores this by drawing a fascinating parallel to the ancient religious heresy of Gnosticism.
Oh, right. The Gnostics operated on the belief that the physical, material world was inherently corrupt, chaotic, and evil, often believing it was created by a flawed, lesser deity. They believed that true salvation and divinity could only be achieved by acquiring secret, esoteric knowledge, or gnosis, which would allow the enlightened elite to shed their physical bodies and transcend the messy material realm.
Doran argues that modern Silicon Valley and the technocratic establishment operate on a highly sophisticated, secularized version of Gnosticism.
That's a wild connection.
It's profound. They look at the physical, biological world with its disease, its inefficiencies, its unpredictable human emotions, and they view it as a flawed, chaotic system that desperately needs to be managed and eventually escaped.
They hate the meat sack.
Exactly. They view the natural world as a problem to be solved. And they believe that their esoteric knowledge, their mastery of AI algorithms, their ability to manipulate genomic sequencing, their capacity to build the metaverse, grants them the divine right to hack the material world, strip it down, and digitize it into a clean, highly controllable synthetic reality.
You know, I think of it like the transition from analog to digital audio.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
If you have a beautifully pressed, high-fidelity vinyl record, it has texture, it has depth, it has warmth, and yes, it has occasional crackles and imperfections because it is a physical object.
Right.
The technocratic mindset looks at that vinyl record and says, This is too heavy, too fragile, and too inefficient. So they compress the music into a highly optimized, low-quality MP3 file. They gain ultimate convenience and absolute control over the data, but they completely strip away the depth, the soul, and the resonant truth of the original performance.
They lose the essence.
Yeah, they are trying to compress natural humanity into an MP3.
That is a perfect analogy for the Technocratic project. They are attempting to optimize the human soul out of existence in the name of efficiency. But, as Doran notes, referencing the Genesis story, whenever humanity attempts to grasp for that level of unbounded, godlike control over the material realm, the result is never a pristine utopia. The result is always death.
So what does this all mean for us? After walking the reader through this absolute gauntlet of high-tech dread, the engineered economic despair of the youth, the virtual imprisonment of the metaverse, the threat of AI labor replacement, the apocalyptic risks of synthetic mirror bacteria, Doran asks a crucial, grounding question.
Is there an alternative?
Exactly. What does actual natural human flourishing look like in the 21st century? To answer this, he contrasts the absolute epicenter of the technocratic machine, the United States, with the Italian island of Sardinia.
Right, Sardinia is globally recognized as a blue zone.
Which means what exactly?
It's a demographic and geographic area where people consistently live much longer, healthier lives than the global average, often featuring a highly disproportionate number of centenarians, people living past the age of 100.
Doran juxtaposes the Sardinian outcomes of the current state of the United States. Despite being the wealthiest nation in history, and the absolute bleeding edge of all this technocratic progress and medical optimization, U.S. life expectancy is shockingly plummeting.
It's dropping incredibly fast.
The sources point out that the U.S. has already dropped to 49th place in global life expectancy rankings, and the metrics measuring healthy, functional years are even more dismal. Actuarial projections suggest the U.S. will plummet to 66th place globally by the year 2050.
66th.
That's
stunning.
The brutal reality is that this high-tech, highly surveyed, hyper-optimized environment is quite literally killing the biological human organism faster.
Meanwhile, you look at the centenarians in Sardinia who are not merely surviving, but living highly satisfying, robust lives well into their 90s and 100s. Doran examines their technology for living, and it is profoundly, stubbornly simple.
It's analog.
Very analog. It is entirely rooted in the physical, biological world that the technocrats despise. Their daily lives revolve around physical labor, like farming and herding sheep. They consume whole foods they pull directly from the dirt.
No lab-grown meat.
No. They are deeply embedded in physical, multi-generational communities where the elderly are revered rather than hidden away in facilities.
And crucially, Doran points out that their entire worldview is anchored by a deeply rooted, humble faith. He notes that the island is predominantly Catholic, and their psychological baseline seems informed by the simple rhythms of the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
They wake up and pray for their daily bread, focusing on immediate, tangible sustenance and gratitude, while explicitly leaving the kingdom, the power, and the glory to God.
The contrast is just breathtaking. The Sardinians represent the absolute antithesis of the transhumanist drive.
They really do.
The transhumanist wants to seize the power and the glory, to conquer death through silicon and synthetic biology, and in doing so, they engineer an environment that accelerates biological decline.
Paradoxically.
Yes. The Sardinian accepts their biological boundaries, submits to the natural rhythms of life and faith, and paradoxically achieves the longevity and flourishing that the technocrat desperately seeks but can never engineer.
They are living the exact, vibrant, natural human existence that the technocratic machine is currently trying to optimize out of existence. But Doran's analysis doesn't end on a perfectly neat, triumphant note.
No, it's quite sobering.
In the source text, he introduces a brutal, tragic irony regarding the current state of Sardinia.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of Doran's overarching thesis, the situation in Sardinia reveals the terrifying scope of the civilizational crisis we are facing. Despite living in this idyllic, healthy, naturally bound haven, Sardinia is currently experiencing a catastrophic demographic collapse.
They aren't having kids.
They are simply not having enough children to sustain their own population.
The numbers in the sources are just dire. The local Sardinian officials are so desperate to stave off complete societal evaporation that they are practically begging American expats to move there, offering to sell historic homes for $1, just to keep the physical towns from turning into ghost towns.
It's tragic.
The environment is perfectly suited for human flourishing, yet the population is quietly opting out of the future.
Doran uses this paradox to suggest that humanity is suffering from a deep, pervasive civilizational malaise that transcends economics or physical geography.
It's deeper than the metaverse or AI.
Exactly. The crisis isn't merely about the external threats of artificial intelligence, gain-of-function research, or the metaverse. It is a profound, internal, spiritual crisis.
Wow.
Whether a population is trapped in a high-tech synthetic dystopia in an American metropolis, or living on a beautiful agrarian island in the Mediterranean breathing fresh ocean air, there is a global loss of meaning. A fundamental disinclination to continue the arduous, messy work of maintaining human civilizational existence.
The technocratic elite are actively building the machinery to replace natural humanity because they view us as obsolete and burdensome. But the great unspoken tragedy Doran exposes is that, on a subconscious level, humanity itself seems to be losing the will to prove the technocrats wrong.
That's the real gut punch.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, pulling from a truly dense and provocative stack of sources. We began with millions of young people silently opening their umbrellas in the rain, intuitively withdrawing their labor from an engineered economy that demands their exhaustion but refuses them stability.
Right.
We examined the technocrats who built that unyielding machine, dissecting their arrogant, Gnostic quest to trap human consciousness in the virtual confines of the metaverse, while rendering our physical bodies obsolete through AI robotics.
We covered a lot.
We navigated the terrifying extremes of their dual religions. The degrowth movement, which seeks to aggressively eradicate humanity to preserve the dirt, and transhumanism, which seeks to erase our biological reality to forge synthetic gods capable of creating mirror bacteria out of sheer, unbounded hubris.
Yeah.
And finally, we arrived at the beautiful tragic paradox of Sardinia, a stunning reminder of the simple, physical, faith-bound requirements for natural human flourishing, yet simultaneously a warning that the loss of foundational meaning is a global pandemic that no amount of clean air or simple living can easily cure.
Joe Doran's work serves as a comprehensive, multidisciplinary diagnosis of the modern condition. He is ultimately challenging the reader to stop blindly accepting technological momentum as inevitable progress.
That's the question.
He demands that we scrutinize the digital tools we use, the economic systems we participate in, and the narratives we accept, and aggressively question whether they are serving to elevate our natural humanity or systematically dismantle it.
Which leaves us with a final, vital thought for you to carry with you long after this discussion ends. If technology is rapidly, exponentially evolving to the point where it can replicate our physical labor, seamlessly simulate our reality, and perhaps even outpace our cognitive intelligence, what is the core, unquantifiable element of being a human that an algorithm or a strand of synthetic mirror bacteria can never possess? And more importantly, as you navigate this increasingly synthetic, optimized world, what specific actions are you taking today to protect and preserve that messy, natural humanity within yourself? Thank you so much for sharing these incredible sources and joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.